The night the Alpha cast me out, the bond between us should have broken. Instead, it burned hotter, twisting into something dangerous, something I could not name. I thought rejection would end the story, but it was only the beginning, because the one who caught me before I fell was his sworn enemy. This is a tale of power and prophecy, of love tangled in war, where every heartbeat could be your last and every kiss could be a weapon. You will walk through storms that taste of blood, hear the whispers of forests older than memory, and stand beneath a red moon that demands a choice no heart should bear. If you're ready to feel every betrayal, every impossible decision, every moment where love and ruin are the same breath, hit subscribe and let the story begin. The rain did not fall. It attacked. Each drop was a needle against my skin, driven by a wind that howled through the skeletal pines. My dress clung to me, heavy and cold, the mud pulling at my boots with every desperate step. Behind me, far but closing, came the echo of howls, the Alpha's trackers, relentless as hunger. I could smell them even through the storm, wet fur, steel, and the faint copper tang of blood. Somewhere ahead lay the unknown. Somewhere behind lay a bond ripped from me like flesh from bone. I had nowhere to go but forward. The forest shifted as I crossed an unseen threshold. The air grew heavier, as if weighed by eyes I could not yet see. My breath stilled for a fraction of a second, the hair on my arms lifting. The trees here were older, their trunks scarred by claws, their roots rising like bones from the earth. I thought I heard the sound of leather brushing bark, but when I turned, the shadows themselves seemed to tighten. And then I saw him, tall, broad, and still, as though carved from the night itself. His presence struck me harder than the storm. No scent of pack clung to him, only wildness, pine sap, ash, and the faint scent of something that made my stomach tighten. "You crossed the wrong border, little wolf," he said, his voice low, rich, and far too steady. His eyes caught the moonlight, silver edges cutting through the dark. The tracker's howls had gone silent. I realized with a strange chill that even they would not follow me here. I had escaped one danger and stepped into another. I forced my voice steady. "I'm not here to fight." My hands trembled, though I prayed he couldn't see it. He stepped closer, slow, deliberate, until I could feel the heat radiating off his body. "No," he said, the corner of his mouth twitching. "You're here to bleed." I didn't know whether it was a threat or a promise. Behind him the forest seemed to breathe, every shadow leaning closer to listen. The distance between us was small enough for my pulse to betray me. Don't show fear. Don't show need. I told myself the words, but my body betrayed me anyway. Every nerve awake, every sense sharpened. The storm roared above, but here, between us, the world had gone too quiet. I thought of the Alpha's eyes when he turned away from me, the finality in his voice, the cold in his scent. And then I thought of the man before me, a stranger, an enemy, yet the only shield between me and the death still hunting me. He tilted his head, studying me as if I were a puzzle worth solving. "You're far from home, and worse, you've lost it." His words cut with the accuracy of a blade. He took a step closer, and my breath hitched despite myself. I should have run. I should have begged. Instead, I stood still, letting the storm wash over me, and met his gaze without flinching. That was the moment I realized. I had been found by the one man my Alpha truly feared, and he wasn't letting me go. The walk to his camp was not a path, it was a trial. Roots caught my boots, branches clawed at my hair, and the cold air bit at my face like a warning. He did not speak, only moved ahead with the quiet certainty of a predator that knows its prey will follow. The forest here seemed older than time, the ground soft with layers of fallen needles and secrets. The wind shifted, and I caught it, the smell of smoke, meat roasting, and unwashed bodies. Somewhere ahead, the flicker of firelight pulsed between the trees, like the heartbeat of something waiting. When we broke through the tree line, the camp unfolded like a vision from another life, but one where survival had claws. Makeshift tents leaned against one another, stitched from hides and weathered canvas, warriors crouched by the flames, sharpening blades whose steel caught the light in flashes. Their eyes turned toward us in unison, each gaze measuring, weighing. A woman with hair like copper embers spit into the dirt. "Soft," she muttered, her voice dripping with dismissal. Another man laughed low. "Won't last a night." The rogue leader, if I could even call him that yet, didn't slow his pace. "She's mine," he said, the words carrying more force than any title could. The murmurs died, replaced by a ripple of tension that spread through the camp like heat. My jaw tightened. Mine. A possession, a weapon, a temporary amusement. Which am I to him? His stride carried me straight into the largest tent, its entrance flanked by carved bone totems whose hollow eyes seemed to follow me. Inside, the air was warmer, tinged with smoke and something bitter. He poured a liquid from a dark jug into 2 rough clay cups, the smell sharp and earthy. "Root tea," he said, though the way he watched me over the rim suggested this was more a test than hospitality. I took a sip, the bitterness biting the back of my tongue. "Why am I here?" I asked. His smile was slow, calculated. "Because I don't trust you, and because I trust the Alpha even less." The way he said the title made it sound like an insult. I set the cup down, the clay rough against my palm. The wind rattled the tent seams, a low, restless sound. I thought of the pack's stronghold, polished stone, polished lies, and felt an ache in my chest I couldn't name. Here everything smelled of danger and honesty, of blood and fire. "Prove you're worth the trouble," he said finally, leaning back as if already certain I would fail, "or you won't see another sunrise." I held his gaze, refusing to flinch. Somewhere deep in my chest, something fierce shifted. If the Alpha wanted me dead, I thought, then maybe staying alive is my rebellion. I didn't yet know what proving myself would mean in this place, or whether I could survive the kind of trials these people respected. But one thing was certain. This man, this camp, this dangerous world, they were all built on the same truth. Here, you're only as valuable as the blood you're willing to spill, and I had just stepped into a place where spilling mine might be the price of staying. Far from the rogue border, the Alpha sat in the great council hall, its high stone arches swallowing the light. The fire in the central pit burned low, shadows climbing the walls like restless spirits. His hands were still, but his mind was a snarl of memory and regret. The rejection ceremony replayed in flashes. My face as the bond tore, the shock in my scent, the way the pack's eyes devoured the moment. The council had demanded it. His curse had ensured it. Yet here he was, tasting the metallic edge of loss as if it were a blade pressed against his tongue. The beta entered, his boots echoing against the stone. "She's in rogue lands," he said, his voice flat. "Let her go. She's no longer yours." The Alpha's jaw tightened, the muscle ticking like the countdown to a storm. She was always mine. The words never passed his lips, but the air between them thickened with unspoken defiance. The beta shifted uneasily under the weight of that silence, but said no more. Outside, the wind carried the scent of approaching snow, a reminder that time was running short. Alone again, he rose and moved to the great window, the land stretching dark beneath the waning moon. He thought of my laughter, the way it had once filled the air like something untouchable. Then he thought of the council's warning, that the curse on his bloodline would spill into mine if we stayed bound. They had promised my death within a year if he did not break the bond. He told himself he had done it for me, but the hollow ache in his chest whispered a different truth. He had sent his best trackers after me, under the guise of protecting the pack from rogue spies. In reality, their orders were simple: bring her back breathing. The thought of me in another man's territory, breathing the air of a sworn enemy, was a thorn he could not ignore. He imagined the rogue leader's hands on me, his voice in my ear, and felt a heat that was not entirely rage. Guilt and jealousy tangled in his gut until he could no longer tell them apart. The fire hissed, throwing sparks into the air like tiny burning stars. He reached for his cup, the wine inside still untouched, the surface quivering with the tremor in his hand. If I go after her myself, he thought, I risk war. If he stayed, the rogues might keep me. He had built his reign on calculated moves, never letting emotion dictate the game. But I had always been the exception to his rules, and now I was the only piece on the board he couldn't control. A sound at the door, the return of another scout. The Alpha turned, the candlelight catching the faint silver in his eyes. "Where is she now?" His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of command. The scout hesitated, as if the answer itself were dangerous to speak. And in that heartbeat of silence, he knew I was deeper in the rogue's world than he had feared. The question clawed at him, sharp as any wound. Was it love, guilt, or power that would drive him into enemy lands to find me? The challenge came at dawn, announced not by words, but by the clash of steel and the growl of gathered voices. When I stepped from the tent, the camp had already formed a circle in the mud, torches sputtering against the wind. My opponent stood waiting, a man built like a wall of stone, his grin wide and feral. "First blood," he said, but there was nothing sporting in his tone. Around us the rogue's eyes gleamed, hungry for spectacle. Somewhere beyond the ring, I felt the rogue leader's gaze settle on me, sharp as a blade drawn halfway from its sheath. The mud sucked at my boots as I stepped forward, the cold seeping through to my bones. My hands curled into fists, though I had no intention of killing. I had never killed. I told myself this was only a fight to prove worth, but the air around us carried the scent of death, old, dried, and patient. The man lunged first, his movements heavy but fast enough to force me back. Pain bloomed in my shoulder where his strike grazed me, a reminder that mercy did not belong here. I heard the jeers of the onlookers, their voices blending with the thrum of blood in my ears. Stay calm. Watch his feet, not his fists. I sidestepped the next blow, the movement more instinct than thought. The ground was slick, and my boot slipped just enough for his elbow to catch my ribs. Breath rushed from my lungs in a sharp gasp, the world tilting for a heartbeat. Then something shifted. A heat began to curl in my chest, rising like smoke, humming with an energy I didn't understand. The next time he swung, I caught his wrist. The moment my skin met his, the hum turned into a spark, a flare of silver light bursting between us. The crowd roared, their shouts tinged with surprise. My opponent's eyes widened as if he'd been burned. The rogue leader's expression changed, not shock, but interest, like a hunter who's just spotted the rarest prey. The energy didn't stop. It coiled in my hands, begging to be released. I didn't know if I could control it. He came at me again, but I moved faster, ducking low and letting my palm brush his side. Another burst, brighter, sharper, and he crumpled to the ground, gasping as though I'd stolen the breath from his chest. Silence rolled through the crowd, broken only by the hiss of the torches. My own hands shook, the aftershock of whatever had just happened racing up my arms. I looked at the man on the ground, then at the silver shimmer still dancing at my fingertips. The rogue leader stepped into the circle, his boots splashing mud, his eyes fixed on mine. "Looks like you've been hiding something, little wolf." His voice was smooth, but I could hear the weight beneath it. Curiosity, calculation, maybe even something like hunger. The crowd parted for him, their faces a mix of fear and fascination. I stood there, chest heaving, trying to steady my breath. Where did that power come from, and what will it cost me to use it again? She found me before I found the nerve to leave the training ring. The crowd had dispersed, though I could still feel their stares lingering like the smoke from the torches. She stepped from the shadows, tall, lean, a scar tracing her cheekbone like a map of old wounds. Her hair was bound tight, streaked with silver, and her eyes were ice fractured by sunlight. "You fight like someone afraid of herself," she said. The words neither insult nor comfort, simply fact. I should have walked away. Instead, I followed her. She led me to a clearing at the camp's edge, where the earth was bare, and the trees formed a circle like silent sentinels. The morning air was sharp with frost, our breaths misting between us. "Again," she ordered, tossing me a short blade. I caught it clumsily, my fingers still trembling from the fight. "You've got power, but no discipline. That'll get you killed faster than being weak." Her stance was loose but ready, the blade in her hand an extension of her will. I realized she wasn't here to test me. She was here to teach me. The first drills were brutal in their simplicity. Parry, step, strike again. The sound of steel meeting steel echoed in the cold, each clash sending vibrations up my arm. She corrected my grip with quick, precise touches, each adjustment a reminder of how much I didn't know. My magic, whatever it was, simmered just beneath my skin, restless. "Let it coil. Don't let it spill," she instructed, her voice cutting through the thud of my heartbeat. "Magic's a wild thing. It will own you if you don't own it first." When we paused, I asked the question that had been gnawing at me since she appeared. "Why help me?" She studied me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Because I've seen your story before." A faint smile ghosted her lips, bitter as winter air. "I loved an alpha once, thought the bond meant safety. I was wrong. He left me to die on the edge of the world." The words sank into me like stones into deep water, heavy and irreversible. In that moment, I saw her not just as a warrior, but as a warning. Her scars were more than skin deep. They were carved into the way she moved, the way she never turned her back to the trees. Is that who I'll become? I wondered. Someone who has turned survival into armor so thick it forgets how to feel? The thought unsettled me, but also it made me want to live long enough to find out. She handed me the blade again, nodding toward the center of the clearing. "One more time," she said. But this time, her eyes held something sharper than instruction, something like expectation. The frost bit at my skin, the weight of the blade grounded me, and the hum of my magic settled low in my chest. I took my stance, feeling the air shift between us. If I'm going to survive this place, I thought, I'll need more than luck. I'll need to become something the Alpha and his enemy never saw coming. I dreamed of him that night, not the rogue leader, but the Alpha. His scent was everywhere, threaded through the wind like a ghost. In the dream, his hand reached for mine, warm and sure, but when our fingers touched, pain lanced through me like a silver blade. I woke with my pulse racing, the scent still clinging to my mind. The camp was quiet, except for the distant murmur of a watchman's steps. In the shadows, I caught movement. The rogue leader, standing just outside my tent, his gaze fixed on me as if he could see through canvas and bone. The mate bond still lived inside me, a stubborn thread that refused to snap completely. I could feel it when the Alpha was near in thought, when his emotions flared like distant lightning. But now, there was something else, a different pull, heavier, like the rogue leader's presence bending the air around me. When he stepped inside, the cold night seemed to retreat. "You fought well today," he said, his voice a low current. I swallowed the urge to ask if that was praise or just observation. He closed the distance slowly, his shadow swallowing mine. "You've felt it, haven't you?" he asked. My heart stuttered. Felt what? His smile was dangerous, like a man who already knew the answer. That you're not bound to just one Alpha anymore. The words left me unsteady, the air between us heavy enough to steal my breath. That can't be true, I thought. But my pulse told a different story. I turned away, hoping he couldn't hear the way it quickened. Later, in the solitude of the forest's edge, I tested the truth in his words. My magic responded to thoughts of the rogue leader, sharper, hotter, but it softened when the Alpha came to mind, almost tender. The contradiction unsettled me. How could I be drawn to both? How could I belong to anyone if I wasn't even sure I belonged to myself? The wind carried no answers, only the faint sound of a wolf howling somewhere far beyond the border. Back in camp, Lysandra caught my expression and narrowed her eyes. "Your bond is splitting," she said, as if it were an injury she could see. That's dangerous. You can't serve two masters, wolf girl. Her voice was sharp, but beneath it was something like concern. I didn't answer. I didn't have an answer. The truth was, every day I spent here, the alpha's pull weakened, and the rogues only grew. That night, I lay awake, listening to the camp settle into silence, the firelight flickering through the seams of my tent. Somewhere, the alpha might be dreaming of me as I once dreamed of him. Somewhere closer, the rogue leader was very much awake, and I could feel his gaze like the brush of a hand I'd never agreed to take. I closed my eyes, knowing tomorrow would bring choices that could not be undone. And yet, I couldn't tell which man I feared losing or finding. It started with whispers. Supplies gone missing. Sentries reporting strange scents near the perimeter. A few rogues claimed they'd seen shadowy figures slipping between trees, only to vanish like smoke. The rogue leader kept his face unreadable, but his orders doubled the guards. "Someone's feeding them," Lysandra murmured to me one night, her gaze scanning the campfires. "And they're not doing it for gold." Her tone suggested she already had suspects. The tension made the camp brittle. Conversation stopped when I approached, eyes flicking toward me with barely hidden suspicion. I felt it in every step, the slow drift of mistrust, the way even the air seemed to hum with unease. "They think it's me," I realized. The thought sank deep, cold and heavy. After all, I was the outsider, the alpha's mate who wasn't. If anyone here had reason to betray them, it was me. I found the rogue leader near the southern watchpost, his gaze fixed on the tree line. "Tell me it's not you," he said without turning. My jaw tightened. "If you think it is, why haven't you thrown me to your wolves?" He finally looked at me, the torchlight carving shadows along his jaw. "Because I don't think you've decided where you belong yet, and until you do, you're more valuable alive." The implication was clear. Once I chose, I would also choose my fate. That night, I heard movement outside my tent. Quiet, careful, the kind of steps that knew how to avoid notice. I slipped out, staying low, following the sound through the maze of sleeping tents. At the edge of camp, I caught a glimpse. A figure in a cloak, slipping a roll of parchment to a hand that emerged from the shadows. I recognized that hand instantly. It belonged to someone I had trusted since the first day here. I didn't call out. Instead, I stepped back, letting the darkness swallow me. My pulse hammered as I returned to my tent, the parchment's imagined contents burning in my mind. If I told the rogue leader, the spy would be dead by dawn. If I stayed silent, the alpha would have his eyes and ears here unchecked. The choice gnawed at me, each option feeling like a betrayal in a different direction. By morning, the camp was already buzzing with fresh tension. Another supply crate gone, another guard swearing they'd seen shapes in the dark. The rogue leader's patience was thinning, and Lysandra's hand hovered near her blade more than once. I kept my secret close, knowing that in this camp the truth could be more dangerous than the lie. But for how long could I hold it before the wrong wolf got torn apart? It was Lysandra who brought me to the seer. We traveled beyond the camp's northern edge, where the trees grew twisted and black, their branches bare even in midsummer. A thin mist coiled along the ground, curling around our ankles. The seer's hut leaned like it was trying to escape the earth, its roof heavy with moss. Inside, the air smelled of dried herbs, old smoke, and something metallic, like blood that had been waiting a long time. The seer was small, her skin lined like worn parchment, but her eyes were bright, reflecting the light of the single candle on the table. She didn't ask my name. She didn't need to. "The moon has marked you twice," she said as soon as I stepped inside. "Once by love, once by war." Her voice was soft, but each word felt like a nail driven into wood. I wanted to ask what she meant, but my throat closed around the question. She took my hands in hers, cool, thin, unshakably steady. "When the blood moon rises, one alpha will fall by your hand, the other will rise beside you or over you." My heart pounded, the meaning heavy and terrible. "I don't want to kill anyone," I whispered. Her gaze didn't soften. The moon doesn't care what you want. Behind her, the candle flickered, casting strange shapes on the walls. Lysandra stood in the corner, her arms crossed, watching my reaction with unreadable eyes. "Prophecies are chains," she said, "but sometimes you can choose how tight they bind you." The seer released my hands, pressing a small vial into my palm. The liquid inside was red, almost glowing. "When the time comes," she said, "this will make the choice clear." I didn't ask what it was. Some truths are more dangerous, spoken aloud. We left the hut in silence, the mist thicker now, clinging to my skin like a warning. The forest seemed to watch us, every creak of branches sounding like breath. My thoughts tangled, the prophecy, the vial, the image of the two alphas facing each other under a sky burning red. The worst part was not the idea of killing one of them, it was the knowledge that part of me already knew which hand would rise and which would fall. Back in camp, I hid the vial deep in my tent. Its weight was small, but its presence loomed over me like a shadow I couldn't escape. Every time the rogue leader passed near, every time the bond to the alpha flared in my chest, I felt the prophecy tighten its grip, and the blood moon was already climbing toward the horizon. The attack came just before dawn, when the mist was still thick enough to hide the enemy until they were at the camp's edge. The first sign was the howl, sharp, guttural, carrying the authority of a command. Then came the crash of steel on steel, the scent of blood spilling into the cold air. I was on my feet before my mind caught up, blade in hand, my tent flap thrown open to chaos. The Alpha's warriors moved like a tide, their armor glinting in the half-light. They cut through the camp with precision, each strike calculated, each step driving the rogues back. I caught sight of the Alpha himself, his form unmistakable even in the haze of battle, tall, commanding, eyes locked not on the rogue leader, but on me. The sight sent a jolt through the bond, sharp enough to steal my breath. The rogue leader was already there, meeting the Alpha's warriors head-on. Their clash was brutal, the kind that made the air hum with impact. I moved between tents, cutting down a warrior who came too close, my magic flaring without my permission. It burned hot this time, silver arcs snapping through the air, making my enemy scream before falling. My hands shook, but I didn't stop moving. Then I saw it, one of the Alpha's men breaking toward the supply tents, a torch in hand. I lunged, catching his arm before the flame could touch canvas. "Why burn supplies?" I demanded, shoving him back. His eyes were wild. "Orders," he spat, "to take you and leave them nothing." My stomach turned cold. The Alpha wasn't here just to retrieve me. He meant to cripple the rogues completely. I found myself in the center of the camp, the rogue leader on one side, the Alpha on the other, both locked in combat with enemies that looked too much like themselves. The prophecy's words pulsed in my head. "One Alpha will fall by your hand." I had never felt more trapped between two blades. My grip on my weapon tightened until my knuckles ached. The battle didn't end so much as it scattered, the Alpha's forces retreating with stolen supplies and 2 prisoners. The rogue leader's fury was a storm I could feel even without touching him. And through the fading bond, I felt the Alpha's satisfaction, as if he'd moved a piece in a game I didn't know I was playing. The war had stopped for now, but it was only catching its breath. The tension after the attack was a living thing. Every glance felt weighted, every conversation edged. The rogue leader's orders came clipped, sharp, leaving no room for questions. Yet whispers spread like fire. Someone inside the camp had helped the Alpha's warriors find their way through the defenses. My stomach clenched with the memory of the figure I'd seen passing that parchment days ago. Lysandra caught me staring too long at one of the guards. "You know something," she said, her voice low, her eyes sharp. "And you're thinking about keeping it to yourself." I looked away, unwilling to give her the satisfaction of being right, but the truth was heavier now. If I spoke, the spy would die. If I stayed silent, the next attack might not end with us standing. That night, the rogue leader called a meeting in the central tent. The firelight threw his shadow long across the walls. "There's a traitor among us," he said, his voice steady but cold. His gaze moved from face to face, lingering on mine just long enough to make my pulse jump. "If they come forward now, they may live. If not—" His silence finished the sentence more clearly than words ever could. The spy didn't step forward. Instead, the room filled with tension thick enough to choke on. Accusations sparked, some in jest, some not. I kept my mouth shut, my fists curled in my lap. The rogue leader watched me, and I couldn't tell if he suspected me or was waiting to see what I would do. The weight of that unasked question sat heavy in my chest. Later, I found Lysandra sharpening her blade in the shadows. "Secrets rot from the inside," she said without looking up. "Careful you don't let yours kill you before your enemies do." Her words dug deep, but I still couldn't make myself speak. It wasn't mercy I felt for the spy. It was the understanding that in this war, every betrayal was just another move on the board. I went to sleep that night with the sound of the whetstone on steel echoing in my head. Every scrape was a reminder. The moment I spoke the truth, blood would spill. And the longer I waited, the more certain it became that the blood might be mine. The days that followed were heavy with silence. Even the forest seemed to hold its breath, the usual chorus of birds muted, the wind whispering in low, anxious tones. In the rogue camp, preparations for battle began quietly, almost reverently, as if the warriors knew the fight ahead would not end with simple victory or defeat. I walked among them, my fingers trailing over the cold steel of blades, feeling the weight of what was coming settle on my shoulders. Lysandra found me sharpening a dagger I hadn't used in weeks. "You should rest," she said, though the shadows under her eyes told me she hadn't been sleeping either. "Rest for what?" I asked, glancing up at the sky. Storm clouds were gathering in a slow, deliberate crawl, the air thick with the scent of rain and something older, sharper. Blood, maybe, or memory. At night I dreamed of the Alpha and the rogue leader, standing on either side of me, each holding a chain. In the dream, I couldn't tell which chain was heavier. I would wake with my chest aching, the bond to the Alpha still alive but tangled with something new, the quiet, unyielding connection I felt to the rogue. If I thought too long about either, my breath caught in my throat. The rogue leader said little, but his eyes followed me like a question he refused to voice. Once as I passed him near the fire, his hand brushed mine, not enough to be called a touch, but enough to burn. "When the time comes," he murmured, low enough for only me to hear, "you'll have to choose faster than you think." I didn't answer. I wasn't sure I could. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, the seer returned. Her eyes, always sharp, seemed clouded now, as if she'd stared too long into something she wished she hadn't seen. "The prophecy is shifting," she said. "You've already changed it once. That makes it unstable." Her words felt like the ground tilting beneath my feet. "Unstable how?" I asked. She only smiled, and it wasn't kind. That night, I didn't sleep at all. The storm broke before dawn, rain drumming on the tents like a heartbeat that refused to slow, the air thick with the scent of war. The battle came not with horns or drums, but with the howl of a lone wolf that split the morning in two. We moved fast, blades and bows ready, boots sinking into mud slick with rain. The Alpha's pack descended from the north, shadows between the trees, their eyes glowing with the same gold that had once felt like safety to me. My heart lurched, but I kept my stance. The first clash was steel on steel, the air ringing with the music of violence. I fought alongside Lysandra, the two of us moving in a rhythm born from trust and desperation. The rogue leader held the front, his strikes precise, each one a warning as much as a kill. I caught sight of the Alpha once across the chaos, his gaze locked on mine for a single heartbeat before another warrior blocked my view. Rain blurred everything, turning friend and foe into silhouettes. My muscles burned, my breath ragged, but I didn't stop. Then I felt it, the bond between me and the Alpha tightening like a noose, trying to pull me toward him even through the melee. My knees almost buckled under its weight, my vision flashing with memories I didn't want. Lysandra grabbed my arm. "Stay with me!" she shouted over the clash. But then the rogue leader appeared, cutting down an enemy before they could strike me from behind. He glanced at me, his voice like gravel and flame. "The bond is weakening," he said. "You can break it here now if you dare." Breaking it meant killing the Alpha, and killing him meant fulfilling the prophecy I'd sworn to avoid. My dagger felt heavy in my hand, and for a moment I wondered if the bond was the only thing keeping me from falling apart entirely. Rain streamed down my face, cold and merciless, washing blood into the soil. In that moment, I realized the truth. The bond wasn't my strength. It was my cage. Night fell mid-battle, the storm clouds parting to reveal a red moon swollen over the treetops. Its light spilled across the field, turning blood black and faces ghost pale. Warriors on both sides hesitated, staring up as if the moon itself had stepped into the fight. My breath caught. The red moon, the final sign in the prophecy. The Alpha pushed through the fray toward me, his movements urgent, almost desperate. "End it!" he shouted, though I couldn't tell if he meant the battle or my life. The rogue leader moved to intercept, steel meeting steel in a clash that rang like thunder. I stood frozen between them, my dagger shaking in my grip. The prophecy's words echoed in my head. "By her hand shall the Alpha fall, and the world with him." But which Alpha? Which world? The seer's warning twisted inside me, sharp and insistent. Maybe the prophecy didn't belong to fate at all. Maybe it belonged to the one willing to claim it. The three of us formed a triangle in the chaos, warriors parting around us as if sensing something sacred or cursed was happening here. The Alpha's eyes burned gold fire, the rogue leader's silver like moonlit steel. My own reflection in their gazes was unrecognizable, not the girl they'd fought over, but the woman who could end them both. Lysandra appeared at my side, her voice low but fierce. "Choose, or the choice will be made for you." The red moon pulsed in the sky, each heartbeat louder than the last. My hand clenched tighter around the dagger, and for the first time I felt stronger than the pull of the bond. I took one step forward, and the world seemed to hold its breath. The Alpha spoke first, his voice low but carrying. "You'll doom us all," he said, but it was the rogue leader who moved closer, his expression unreadable. "Or she'll save us," he countered, his tone soft, dangerous. My heart pounded so hard I thought they might hear it. The dagger in my hand felt lighter now, as if it had decided on its own what to do. I lifted my gaze to the red moon, its light wrapping the three of us in a circle that felt too small for so much history. Then, without giving myself time to think, I threw the dagger, not at either of them, but into the ground between us. The sound it made sinking into the earth was louder than any shout. Both men froze. "You think this ends with my blood or his," I said, voice steady, "but I say it ends with neither." Gasps rippled through both sides of the battlefield. The prophecy had demanded a death. I'd given it defiance instead. The bond between me and the Alpha trembled, loosening like a knot pulled by steady hands. The Alpha stepped back, his jaw tight, but he didn't press forward again. The rogue leader's eyes searched mine, but whatever he found there made him lower his blade. Around us, the battle slowed, warriors glancing to their leaders for orders that didn't come. Lysandra came to my side, her face unreadable, but her voice calm. "You've just rewritten a prophecy older than kingdoms," she said. "Then maybe it's time someone did," I answered. My chest felt light, almost weightless. The absence of the bond, a strange new freedom. As the two armies began to disperse, I realized I had chosen, not between them, but for myself, and in that choice I had become something neither of them could claim. Days later, the fires were gone, and the forest was quiet again. The air smelled of damp earth and pine, not blood or ash. I walked alone to the clearing where the moon had bled red over the battle, my boots pressing into soil still marked by war. Above me, the sky was soft with silver light, a new moon rising clean and unburdened. The Alpha had left without a word. I didn't know if I'd see him again, but I felt the bond's ache fade with each passing night. The rogue leader remained in the camp for a time, watching me from a distance, speaking little. But when he left, he did so without trying to claim me, as if he'd understood that what we'd shared was not about ownership, but survival. Lysandra stayed. We rebuilt the camp together, though I knew I wouldn't remain forever. "So," she said one morning, tossing me an apple, "what's next for the woman who defied a prophecy?" I bit into it, the crisp sweetness a reminder of life after ashes. "Whatever I want," I answered, and meant it. At night, I sometimes dreamed of the red moon, of two sets of eyes calling my name, but in the dreams, I always walked away from both, into the forest alone, my own shadow at my back. And instead of fear, I felt freedom. The seer came to me once more, her eyes unreadable. "You did change the prophecy," she said, "but not all endings stay still." I didn't know what she meant, and I didn't ask. Some truths could wait. As I left the clearing for the last time, the wind moved through the trees, carrying no whispers of war, only the sound of my own footsteps. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't walking toward someone else's fate. I was walking toward my own.